Hello and welcome, and as the title suggests, I will be doing a review for the second sight of Zachary Cloudesley by Sean Lusk. So this is a historical fantasy book. Yes, that's the term I'm going to use because I believe that's the term they use. So it has a lot of historical elements to it, but it also has some fantasy elements to it as well. So when reading the synopsis, it tells you that the story is about Zachary, who has this unimaginable gift that when he comes into contact with someone, he can see the future about said person. And his father ends up going missing while he's young, and he sets out to Constantinople to find out what happened to his father. So that is like the main gist of the synopsis. Now I'm going to start out by saying, don't read the synopsis. Don't, because for me the synopsis set up a completely different expectation for the story than what was actually presented and given to me. And I don't mean this in a bad way, I just mean that this is where sometimes synopses can be very frustrating for me, and why I tend to ignore them when I go into a book, because sometimes the synopsis can give you a false sense of what you're getting versus what you actually get. Now, I'm not overly disappointed with what I got in this book. It's a 3-star for me. It's a strong, solid debut. There is a lot of potential, and I look forward to the next book that Lusk decides to write, because it did keep me entertained. The problem was my expectations were different than what had been delivered. So Zachary does have this power. The problem is it plays an extremely minor role in the story. And Zachary himself also plays an extremely minor role throughout the entire story. And it's weird when you go into it expecting Zachary to play an actual very big part of the story, because the synopsis makes it sound like it's going to heavily follow him. I don't really feel like Zachary was the actual main character. The story tended to talk around Zachary and around his existence in this world with his father and everyone else. The story is broken up into 3 parts. The first part of the story is very long, and it focuses mainly on Abel, Zachary's father. And that in itself is not bad, but because the synopsis made me believe that this was going to be a story about Zachary, it was kind of a disappointment, because I kept going, when does this become Zachary's story? When do I start paying attention to Zachary? When does he become the main focus? And unfortunately, it feels like he never does become the main focus until the final 5 chapters. That was kind of when it felt like that was when the story was Zachary's story. You get to see glimpses of Zachary's gift and how he uses it. There was at least a chapter that really kind of focused in on his gift and his ability, but other than that, it was just kind of here's a moment with it, here's a moment with it, here's a moment with it. And then it does this really weird thing with it that I feel there wasn't enough explanation as to why what happens with his power happens. I don't feel like we really got an explanation or closure around the event that happens with his power when he reaches Constantinople. And it was kind of disappointing, because it feels like a piece of the story that's just left loose and hanging. And I'm just kind of like, well, why? Why did that happen? What was the cause and the source for it? And it's really the only thing that I've come out of the book that really honestly bothers me in complete, throughout the entire story. This one element that happened in this book involving his powers, and the fact that we got 0 explanation as to why it happened, is the one thing that bothers me most, because I'm just like, you didn't tell me why this happened. There's 0 explanation. It just happens. And it feels kind of like a letdown. I don't like that, because even Zachary himself in the story was like, why did this happen? Why is this happening? I don't understand. And I'm like, I don't understand either. I would like to know too. And I was never told. And neither was Zachary. So that was honestly kind of an annoyance. The characters are all very interesting. Like I said, Zachary falls to the background, even though you think he's supposed to be the main character. Abel actually has way more main character vibe than Zachary does, and so did his aunt Frances and his nursemaid Miss Morley. They all stood out so much more, and it's a very interesting like take and process, honestly. And if I hadn't gone in with the expectations that I had when I initially read it, I would have enjoyed all of those point of views like 1,000 times more, because I wouldn't have been waiting for the moment for Zachary to shine. And it's even when you read like the title, like you think the story is going to focus on Zachary, but it tends to just focus around him. So all the history aspects that are involved in this, they go to Constantinople. You get to learn about the Sultan and stuff there. A lot of real life terminology is used for this. There is a handy little index at the beginning of the story that explains positions and titles and whatnot, so you know exactly what kind of person you're dealing with. But other than that, I don't really feel the exploration into Constantinople was that strong. Like, it felt more as if it was just a backdrop to a world, as opposed to the characters actually being in the world and like connecting and interacting with it, because it all happens so fast and it happens so quickly, and it's like scene, done. That's kind of like how it plays out best, as I can say. All the times that we're in London, it felt like the story actually lived and breathed in London, whereas it felt like we just needed a scene change when we went to Constantinople. So it was like secluded to like this one little corner of Constantinople, which was around the Sultan and whatnot, and his home. So I liked the inclusion, but I also kind of wish it was just a little bit more in depth and felt a little bit more lived in. And this even goes for the traveling. There was a bit of traveling in this book, which wasn't inherently bad. And I like traveling in a book, and I think what we got, it was decent. We got to see a couple of more places. Zachary got to see a little bit of the world, but I think because so much of the first half of this story focused on Abel, it really allowed for the second half to really kind of suffer with not really having the time to really kind of like grow and like pull you in and really think, oh yes, this boy is out there traveling on his own, trying to get to his father, seeing the world for the first time, because he's been tutored his entire life in a house by his aunt. And you don't really get to see, like, everyone likes to talk about how strange and odd Zachary is, but like you don't really get to see it, which is another like kind of a letdown, because you want to see that aspect to him, but instead he just kind of comes off as a boy who really doesn't know anything about the outside world. So like when he was 6, because you got to see him when he was 6, he did have a little bit of that. He had that like 6-year-old curiosity within him, which is kind of normal, but it was like just a little bit more so than other people. But as he got older, like everyone kept saying he was a little strange, a little weird, but you never really got to live it and feel it. And I do have to say, there is some LGBT rep in this, and I think it was handled beautifully. I loved the way it ended and how it felt real and natural. It was cute and it was adorable, and as you see it unfold for this particular character, you're just like, this is so sweet, oh my god, because you kind of weren't expecting it. It doesn't overshadow the rest of the story. It's just like it's a part of his life that kind of like starts to pop up, and I think it was adorable, and I thought it was handled really well. So overall, I think if you just go into this not expecting the story to focus on Zachary, you will enjoy it a lot more. And it is a slower paced story, but it is still intriguing and enticing because of things that are going on with it. I also think a lot of the clockwork automata, unfortunately, didn't play a big enough part either to really make it interesting. And that's one of the other things that pop up in the synopsis. It talks about how Abel is a clockwork maker and he's making automata for the Sultan and whatnot. I just don't feel it played big enough a part to really stand out. It was there, it was in the background, you knew it was going on, and that was pretty much it. So but I did enjoy the inclusion of it. So overall, it's an interesting book. It's very intriguing. I think it's worth taking the time to just pick it up and be like, this could be an interesting read. I don't think you're going to be blown away by it. It's not going to like knock you off your socks or anything. I don't even think that phrase is right, but you know. But I do think it's going to be interesting. Like I said, I am going to look forward to the next book that Lusk puts out. He does have a great writing. I will say it did take a little bit for me to get into the rhythm of his writing. I honestly cannot tell what point of view style this is written in, if it's first, second, third. I really can't, and I don't know why. It feels third, but then at times it feels like first, and it leaves me a little confused. So yeah, that's probably just on me though, because I'm not the greatest at always differentiating the different types of point of view writing styles. But once I figured out the verbiage and how he phrases his sentences and the just ideal way of his writing, I was able to fall into the rhythm and was able to pick it up just fine. But that first couple of pages, it was a little bit difficult for me. But overall, it's a pretty simple, easy to read kind of book. So it's worth checking out, especially if you're into historical fantasy fiction. It's got a nice little twist here and there, and you get like that little bit of that history stuff going on as well. So that's my review of The Second Sight of Zachary Cloudesley by Sean Lusk. So if you guys have read this, if not, if it sounds interesting, if you just have any comments or not, just leave it down below, like, subscribe, all those good things, and I will talk to you guys next time. Bye.